Donald Trump asserted that China bears the cost of tariffs on 47 distinct occasions following April 2025. Jasmine Crockett tabulated these 47 instances, as analyzing facts is fundamental to an attorney's work. This evening, during a live town hall in Phoenix, Arizona, with an audience of 50 million viewers, she produced the singular thing Donald Trump universally loathes: evidence. It was not intricate proof necessitating expert testimony or protracted legal cross-examination. It was straightforward evidence: a Walmart cart, a purchase receipt, and an inquiry any American homemaker could address, yet the U.S. president could not. If China is subsidizing these tariffs, Crockett asked, her tone cutting through the arena's tense silence, then why did this specific cartload cost me $130 more than last year? It was a rudimentary inquiry, simple arithmetic. Yet for the individual seated 10 feet away, clad in a suit costing more than typical American rent, it proved more complex than previous legal challenges. This scenario provided no attorneys to argue on his behalf, no Truth Social platform for exclaiming about persecution, just cameras, spectators, and a Dallas congresswoman gripping a store receipt. The debate moderator attempted to establish procedural rules. Crockett smiled politely and waited while Trump nervously adjusted his audio gear. The crowd, a calculated mix of GOP members, Democrats, and independent voters, remained in uncomfortable silence. Everyone sensed an impending occurrence, although none could predict exactly what it would be. If you have previously scrutinized a food invoice and wondered why costs are currently so elevated, stay engaged with this account. Tonight you shall learn the identity and location of the individual responsible. Furthermore, if you know others also paying higher amounts for fewer goods, distribute this information to them, as they deserve to know who authorizes their bills. Selecting Phoenix for this town hall was intentional. Arizona is a crucial swing region where intense summer temperatures were matched only by escalating expenses. It is a territory where retirees on fixed incomes watched food costs increase monthly as the president claimed another party absorbed the expense. This state shifted Democratic in 2020, Republican in 2024, and presently poised on a razor's edge, uncertain of its next political course. The arena accommodated 800 individuals, and every single chair was filled. Outdoors, an additional 2,000 people viewed monitors set up within the parking area as the desert evening remained mild enough for tolerable standing. Throughout the country, living rooms, taverns, and office lounges watched, drawn by the promise of a unique event. It was not a structured debate with rigid clocks, nor a political rally featuring orchestrated cheering. It promised a dialogue or a close approximation of one. Jasmine Crockett entered the platform carrying a canvas tote filled with actual provisions rather than stage props. She placed the bag on the desk separating her from Trump, then removed products individually, arranging them similarly to exhibits in a legal trial. A cereal carton, chicken breasts, diapers, a coffee maker, kids' footwear, laundry soap, batteries, and a simple blue frock, the kind a mom purchases for school photos. $847, she declared, displaying a sales slip that unrolled resembling a parchment. That is the amount I spent at Walmart earlier today for this merchandise. The previous year, identical products, identical labels, identical retailer cost $712. She allowed the paper record to fall upon the surface where it twisted like a serpent, a $135 discrepancy. That is not attributable to inflation, Mr. President. Inflation rates were decreasing prior to your assumption of power. The Federal Reserve managed the situation effectively. We were approaching the 2% goal, which financial experts deem robust. Subsequently, you arrived, implementing your import taxes, and the entire landscape shifted. This represents artificial economic shifting rather than natural fluctuation. It is policy, specifically your policy. Trump readjusted in his chair, his countenance already flushing red. China is contributing billions toward our national funds. No, sir, Crockett interrupted, her tone acute yet disciplined. No, they absolutely are not, and I possess the documentation to demonstrate it literally. She elevated the cereal package, rotating it so cameras and the crowd could view the recognizable brand. This grain product contains Canadian wheat, taxed at 25%. The fiberboard container is manufactured using Chinese supplies, taxed. The dye on the sticker, the internal plastic wrap, the adhesive binding it together are taxed. By the moment this package arrives on a Phoenix display shelf, it has been assessed 4 separate times via 4 distinct tax schedules. Furthermore, who clears those duties? Not Canada, not China, and not the cereal manufacturer, because they transfer costs to vendors. Not the vendors, because they transfer costs to shoppers. Mrs. Rodriguez in row 3, trying to nourish her grandkids on Social Security, she is the payer. The camera located Mrs. Rodriguez, 73 years old, silver hair drawn into a tidy knot, hands clasped, sitting, nodding gradually, eyes shining. You asserted China pays tariffs 47 times since April, Crockett proceeded. I tallied, my team tallied. We possess a ledger, 47 separate times on Truth Social, in addresses, in media appearances. However, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, a figure named by Republicans, a man you personally reappointed, stated otherwise last month. He declared, and I quote, "Tariffs are causing most of the inflation overshoot we are currently experiencing." She stopped, allowing the statement to linger in the atmosphere like fumes. Not China, not Mexico, not the European Union, not currency manipulation or inequitable trade methods, or any alternative villains you enjoy accusing. American households are covering your tariffs, Mr. President. It's on $200 annually per resident, according to the Tax Foundation. That is not a left-wing policy institute. That is a bipartisan group that has evaluated tax legislation since 1937, without $200 for every household each year. She lifted the child's sneakers, petite and pink, featuring Velcro fasteners. This is not America first. This is American families pay first. Trump leaned in, his volume increasing. The tariffs are restoring manufacturing. We are witnessing factories where Crockett intervened. Prove it. Show me one single manufacturing plant that initiated operations due to your tariffs. Give me a title, a site, a quantity of employment positions, because I can demonstrate plenty that ceased operations. I can demonstrate Iowa agriculturalists who lost soybean trade because China retaliated, purchasing from Brazil instead. I can demonstrate Michigan auto employees whose facilities are reducing hours because steel runs 40% higher than 2 years prior. I can demonstrate Texas small business proprietors in my district unable to maintain inventory because every import costs more. She raised the footwear again. These shoes are produced in Vietnam. Prior to your tariffs, they cost $20. Currently, they cost $31. That represents a 40% hike for size 6 children's shoes for a young girl who will outgrow them in 4 months. And you realize what occurs when children's footwear costs 40% extra? Parents purchase fewer pairs. Kids wear sneakers that are too tight. Kids attend school developing foot blisters. Kids get mocked for wearing deteriorated shoes because parents cannot manage new ones. Her tone softened, yet her gaze remained fixed on Trump. That is not economic policy, Mr. President. That is a decision. You chose to tax shoes on children's feet so you could stand at rallies claiming toughness on China. But China is not the entity whose feet ache. American children are, and their parents are the ones awake at night attempting to balance the budget. The audience was quiet, not the awkward quiet of humiliation, but the profound quiet of realization, of people seeing their own receipts, struggles, and sleepless nights mirrored from that stage. Trump opened his mouth to answer, but Crockett had not concluded. You desire to know the genuine gag? The tariff income you so proudly boast, those billions flowing into the Treasury, do not even cover the corporate tax cuts you bestowed in 2017. You increased taxes on working families, concealed within the price of every purchase, to finance tax cuts for billionaires and global conglomerates. That is not art of the deal. That is art of the steal. And tonight, 50 million Americans are watching you attempt to explain why they should express gratitude for you robbing them. She turned to the onlookers, her voice reaching every angle of the hall. If you are paying increasingly for food, clothes, diapers, medication, and school supplies, And desire the reason, the answer sits right there, 10 feet from me, and he has been deceiving you regarding it 47 times. The clapping began gradually from the rear of the hall, then swelled like a tide moving toward the platform. It was not the managed cheering of a political event where aides prompt the mob and placards wave on cue. It was the authentic, furious, relieved applause of folks who finally heard someone articulate what they had felt for months. Trump sat in his seat, jaw clenched, fingers grasping the chair arms until knuckles turned white. Round one concluded, and the receipt lay on the table. If you are experiencing this in your own billfold, share this narrative. Let others know they are not isolated and remain tuned, because we are merely beginning. If you believe the tariff falsehood was egregious, wait until you hear about the wall. Crockett allowed the applause to diminish naturally, not hurrying, not exploiting it. She reached into her tote again, this time extracting a photograph enlarged to poster size, backing on foam board. It was an image of the border barrier, half-built, corroding in the Arizona desert, metal posts standing like fractured teeth against the brushland, gaps where work had ceased, tumbleweeds collecting at the foundation. Let us discuss another pledge, she declared, because China pays tariffs is not your initial lie regarding others paying for items. It is not even your most well-known one. She held up the picture, rotating slowly so everyone in the venue could view it. In 2016, you stood on stages across this nation and delivered one promise exceeding all others. It was your signature phrase, your calling card, the element that brought crowds to their feet every single time. Mexico will fund the wall. You stated it at every rally, put it on hats, put it on T-shirts, made crowds chant until hoarse, "Who is going to fund the wall?" And they screamed back. She placed the photograph down, leaning it against the desk facing the crowd. So let me inquire, Mr. President, how much has Mexico contributed for this barrier? Trump's countenance shifted through various looks in rapid succession. Defiance, calculations, something resembling embarrassment if he were capable. We have brokered trade agreements that are more than zero, Crockett stated flatly. Zero. Not a peso, not a cent, not a single centavo. Mexico has contributed exactly nothing toward your wall. Their administration has stated so. Our administration has stated so. The Congressional Budget Office has stated so. Everyone capable of counting has stated so. She moved nearer to the photograph, pointing at the oxidizing metal. You realize who has paid? The American taxpayer. You realize the amount? $46.6 billion within your 2022 spending legislation alone. That is not calculating what was expended during your initial term. That is not calculating military resources you diverted. That is merely one bill, 1 year, $46.6 billion. Money extracted from Medicaid, from SNAP assistance, from initiatives feeding starving kids and supplying health care to the aged so you could construct a wall Mexico was meant to fund. She walked closer to Trump, heels striking the stage floor with every stride. You possess a pattern, Mr. President, a distinct, very foreseeable pattern. You pledge that someone else will pay. China pays tariffs. Mexico pays for the wall. You will become wealthy signing up for Trump University. And subsequently, when the invoice arrives, when the check requires writing, when someone actually must reach into their pocket and produce real cash, who pays? Not China, not Mexico, not you, American households every single time. Trump attempted to interject, voice rising. The wall is securing our boundary. We have the lowest illegal entries in years. The wall is rusting in the desert. Crockett retorted. Miles unfinished, contractors walking off the project because financing keeps getting entangled in courts. Because it turns out constructing a 2,000-mile barrier across mountains, rivers, private land, and tribal territories is more complex than a campaign motto. But you acquired your desire, right? You got the rallies, you got the chants, you got the red hats, you got elected twice, and Americans received the tab, $46.6 billion and counting. She turned back to the audience, voice lowering to a conversational pitch. This is not concerning immigration policy. We can possess honest debates about border safety. Reasonable individuals can differ on the optimal approach. This concerns a con, a very basic con that has functioned for this man his whole life. Promise someone else pays, collect benefits yourself, accept credit, accept applause, accept votes, and leave believers holding the tab. She raised two fingers, two promises. China pays, Mexico pays. Both falsehoods, both revealed, both financed by you, the American populace, out of your taxes, grocery bills, and children's futures. And I am only just beginning. She paused, eyes scanning the crowd, then returning to Trump. Because these are not the sole people Donald Trump promised would pay while robbing you. Have you ever heard of Trump University? If not, do not worry, you are about to. And unlike your tariffs and your wall, this one is not merely bad policy, this is fraud. Certified, court-documented, 25 million settlement-paying fraud. The color drained from Trump's face. His hand moved toward the water glass, then halted. Round two was finished, and the pattern was becoming impossible to disregard. In 2005, Donald Trump possessed an idea, not exactly a business concept, not a real estate concept, a marketing concept disguised as education. Wearing a graduation cap and charging tuition, he named it Trump University. The sales pitch was basic, delivered with the assurance of a man who spent decades convincing folks he was smarter than reality. Pay up to $35,000, and Donald Trump would personally share his success secrets. You would learn from hand-picked instructors, real estate experts chosen by Trump himself. You would learn techniques Trump uses to build his empire. You would become wealthy. You would become successful. You would become, in some small manner, like Donald Trump. 6,000 individuals believed him. 6,000 individuals who desired a superior life, who thought education was the route to prosperity, who trusted a famous name. They were incorrect. Crockett withdrew a manila folder thick with papers and opened it slowly, deliberately. "Let me introduce you to some people who believed in Trump University," she declared. Bob Go, 76 years old, retired after 40 years working in New York, used $35,000 of retirement savings to enroll in the Gold Elite program, the premium package, the one promising personal mentorship and insider secrets. She pulled a document from the folder. You know what Mr. Gould learned? Things he could have located on Google, gratis, basic real estate data available in any library. You know how Trump's hand-picked instructors were actually chosen? Trump admitted under oath in a deposition that he did not select them, did not interview them, did not review credentials, did not even know their names. Handpicked by Donald Trump meant handpicked by someone Trump never met. She held up the document. This is from Mr. Guo's testimony. Let me read it to you. The more and more I got involved in Trump University, the more and more I found out that I had truly been scammed. At first it was embarrassing. I felt foolish. I felt like I should have known better. Then I became very, very angry that the man that scammed me out of all the money had the audacity to run for president. She placed the document down and withdrew another. And here is someone else. I will call her Mrs. Williams because she requested privacy, though her story is in court records. A widow from Florida, 68 years old, her husband died after 42 years of marriage, leaving her alone for the first time in adult life. He had a life insurance policy, $200,000, her security, her future, her husband's final gift to ensure she would be okay. Crockett's tone softened. Mrs. Williams wanted to invest that money wisely. She saw an advertisement for Trump University, a free seminar. She went, and they told her about the Gold Elite program, $35,000. They told her Donald Trump himself would share secrets. They told her she could double, triple, quadruple her money in real estate. They told her this was her chance to secure her future. She looked at Trump. You know what Mrs. Williams got for $35,000? A photo with a cardboard cutout of Donald Trump, not even the real man. A cardboard cutout and a binder full of information she could have downloaded from the internet. She lost more than money. She lost confidence. She lost judgment. She spent years wondering if she was stupid, if she deserved to be scammed, if her husband would be ashamed. Crockett placed the document down. You promised these people they would achieve wealth. You realize who actually achieved wealth? You did. from their pension funds, their insurance payouts, their aspirations, their reliance, and their desire for improved tomorrows. Trump eventually responded, his tone guarded. Trump University boasted a 98% approval rating. 98%. Those are authentic polls. Then for what reason did you pay $25 million to resolve the legal case? Crockett retorted. $25 million, Mr. President, concerning an entity with 98% approval. Contented clients do not litigate. Contented clients do not organize class action suits involving 6,000 claimants. Contented clients do not retain counsel and waste years in tribunals attempting to recover their finances. She withdrew one final document. The New York Attorney General termed it, and I quote, a stunning reversal by Donald Trump and a major victory for the over 6,000 victims of his fraudulent university. Victims, that is the term, not students, not customers, victims. She emphasized the word again, allowing it to hang in the air. You realize what you stated prior to that settlement? You stated, I will never settle this case. Never, I do not settle. Settling is for people who are guilty, your exact words, and subsequently you wrote a $25 million check. You realize who does that? Guilty people. People knowing that if they go to trial, if a jury sees evidence, it will be worse. People who are, in legal terminology, caught. Crockett walked back to her table and lifted the cereal box again, so let us connect dots. China will pay, you pay. Mexico will pay, you pay. You will be rich from Trump University. You lost savings. See the pattern? He promises someone else will pay or benefit, and every single time regular Americans end up holding the bill while he walks away counting money. She set the cereal box down. But Trump University victims at least received a settlement. They got some money back, 80 to 90 cents on the dollar according to the court. It took years. It took lawyers. It took a lawsuit dragging through an entire presidential campaign. But they got something. The people paying your tariffs right now do not get a settlement. They do not get a class action lawsuit. They do not get a judge stating they were defrauded. They just receive higher prices at Walmart and a president telling them China is paying. The audience was no longer merely nodding. Some were visibly angry, arms crossed, jaws set. Others had tears in eyes, remembering their own moments of misplaced trust. An older man in the third row, wearing a veteran's cap with pins from Vietnam and Desert Storm, shook his head slowly, steadily, as if keeping time with a song only he heard. 6,000 people trusted you with their life savings, Crockett said quietly, and you took it. That is not business. That is not negotiation. That is not the art of the deal. That is theft with a marketing budget and a famous name. She paused, looking directly at Trump. But wait, it gets worse, because those 6,000 people are not the only ones you have cheated. They are not even close. Round 3 was over and the receipts were piling up like evidence in a prosecutor's office. Before Donald Trump was president, before he was a reality TV star on The Apprentice, before Trump University scammed retirees out of savings, he was a builder. Or more accurately, he hired builders. Thousands of them over decades. Contractors, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, cabinet makers, painters, landscapers, small business owners who believed a contract with Donald Trump meant a paycheck, who thought his name on an agreement was as good as money in the bank. They were incorrect. Crockett pulled out a thick stack of papers, at least 3 inches high, and dropped them on the table with a thud echoing through the silent auditorium. 3,500 lawsuits, she declared. That is how many times Donald Trump or his companies have been sued by people he refused to pay. Not 300, not 35, 3,500. Exposed by USA Today. In an investigation in 2016, exposed again by dozens of news organizations since then, 3,500 contractors, vendors, and small business owners who did work for Donald Trump and never saw money. She picked up the top document, a court filing yellowed with age. Edward Friel, family business in Philadelphia, cabinet makers, 3 generations of craftsmen, father to son to grandson, building beautiful furniture with hands. The Friels built cabinets for Trump's Taj Mahal casino in Atlantic City, Beautiful work, museum quality, hand-fitted joints, custom finishes, craftsmanship taking decades to learn and centuries of tradition to perfect. She looked up from the document. They were promised $83,000. You know how much they got? Zero. Nothing. Trump refused to pay. Said work was not up to standard. The same work already installed in his casino. The same work guests were already admiring. Crockett looked at Trump. Do you remember what you said when the Friels complained? When they begged for money? When they explained $83,000 was their operating budget for months? You said two words, sue me. Those were your exact words. Sue me, because you knew something they did not. Suing a billionaire costs more than $83,000. Lawyers charge by the hour, depositions take days, discovery takes months, appeals take years. Most small business owners cannot afford lawyers for that kind of fight, so they had a choice: accept nothing or go bankrupt fighting for what they were owed. She pulled out another document. The Friel family business closed after 3 generations, after decades building a reputation for quality, after employing dozens of workers depending on them for livelihoods. Gone because Donald Trump decided not to pay a bill. And when they were destroyed, when employees were out of work, when family legacy was erased, do you know what you were doing? Buying another golf course, their $83,000 would not have covered greens fees for a season. Trump shifted uncomfortably in his seat. In business, you negotiate. Sometimes work is not up to standard. You did not negotiate, Crockett cut in, voice hard. You stole. There is a difference. Negotiation is when both parties agree to terms before work is done. Negotiation is discussing price, quality, and timeline up front. Theft is letting someone do work, accepting work, using work, then refusing to pay. 3,500 times, Mr. President. That is not negotiation. That is a business model built on exploitation. That is a strategy. Hire small businesses unable to fight back, take their work, refuse to pay, and dare them to sue. She turned to audience. Raise your hand if you own a small business or if someone in your family does. A parent, sibling, spouse, child. Dozens of hands went up across the auditorium. Now imagine this. You get a contract with a famous billionaire. You are thrilled. This is the break you waited for. You do work. Good work. Work you are proud of. Work you stay late to finish. Work you check twice. Work you put your name on. You send invoice and then nothing. Months pass. You call, you email, leave messages with secretaries. Finally, someone calls back and tells you, Mr. Trump does not think work was worth what he agreed to pay. He is offering 30 cents on the dollar. Take it or sue him. She let scenarios sink in, watching faces in audience shift from attention to recognition to anger. That is not hardball. That is not tough negotiation. That is not the way business is supposed to work. That is predatory. It is using wealth and lawyers as weapons against people who cannot fight back. It is knowing system protects people with money and punishes people without it. And it is same pattern we have seen all night. China pays, Mexico pays, contractor accepts whatever I decide to give him after work is done, because what choice does he have? Crockett picked up children's shoes from earlier. You want to know why I keep coming back to these shoes? Because person who made them somewhere in Vietnam is just like Friel, someone who did honest work and trusted they would be paid fairly. And just like Friel, they are getting less than deserved. Not because of inflation, not market forces, not anything they did wrong, because Donald Trump decided he would rather tax their work than pay his bills. She set shoes down carefully, almost gently. 3,500 lawsuits, 6,000 Trump University victims, $46 billion for wall Mexico was supposed to pay, while the $200 per family per year tariffs added up. This is not a presidency. This is not a business career. This is a pattern. A lifelong pattern of taking from others and leaving them to deal with consequences. And American working people are always ones left holding bill. The veteran in third row was no longer just shaking head. He was standing up slowly, supporting himself on chair in front, old knees protesting, but determination overriding pain. Ma'am, he said, voice carrying across silent auditorium, My son had drywall company, subcontracted for one of his properties in Atlantic City in '90s, never got paid, filed bankruptcy 2 years later, lost house, wife left. I thought I was only one who remembered. I thought everyone forgot. Crockett nodded at him, eyes meeting his across room. You are not alone, sir. There are 3,500 families just like yours, and tonight they are watching too. Round 4 was over and weight of evidence was becoming crushing. Numbers do not lie. People lie about numbers constantly, inflating, deflating, hiding, spinning. But numbers themselves are stubborn, indifferent things. They sit waiting to be counted, and they do not care about politics, feelings, campaigns, slogans, rally crowds. They just are. Jasmine Crockett pulled out a calculator, an actual calculator kind accountants use, with paper tape printing calculations in neat little rows. Old-fashioned, deliberate, a prop, yes, but also tool reminder underneath rhetoric. There are numbers, and numbers tell truth. Let us do some math, she said. Kind they do not teach at Trump University because it involves actually being honest about money. She began punching numbers, calculator clicking with each keystroke. Trump University settlement, $25 million paid to victims of fraud. E. Jean Carroll verdict number 1, $5 million. Jury found Donald Trump sexually abused her, then defamed her when she told truth. E. Jean Carroll verdict number 2, $83.3 million. Another jury, another finding, more defamation because even after first verdict, he could not stop attacking her. Calculator printed tape with mechanical whir combined total for Carroll verdicts, $88.3 million. That is 2 juries by way, 2 separate groups, 12 Americans randomly selected who heard evidence and said he did this. Not politicians, not partisan operatives, regular people doing civic duty. She ripped off tape and held it up. Add together $25 million plus $88 million, $113 million paid out for things you said you did not do. That is a lot of money for a man claiming innocence. Trump's jaw tightened, muscles and face work. Those were politically motivated lawsuits. By whom? Crockett asked, voice genuinely curious. Jurors, 12 random citizens in each case, selected through process where your lawyers got to reject anyone they did not like. Were they all Democratic operatives, all part of deep state? Judges? Carroll cases presided over by judges appointed by both Democrats, Republicans. Were they all in on it too? At what point, Mr. President, does everyone holding you accountable become part of conspiracy? And at what point does it become simpler to accept maybe, just maybe, you actually did things found liable for? She sat down, calculator. But here's what really bothers me. You paid $113 million, never admitted wrongdoing, not once, not single time. You know what that means? It means you learned nothing. It means you will do it again, because in your mind, $113 million was not consequence, not justice, not accountability. It was cost of doing business. Price of continuing to operate exactly way you always have. She picked up calculator tape, held to light. Let me tell you what $113 million could buy. It could send 4,000 students to college, full ride, 4 years, room, board, books, everything. 4,000 young people with degrees, futures, opportunities. It could fund school lunch programs for an entire state for a year, making sure no child goes hungry while trying to learn. It could build affordable housing for 500 families, giving stability, safety, foundation for better lives. She let tape fall onto table instead. It went to lawyers, settlements, verdicts, because you could not keep hands to yourself, could not tell truth about businesses, could not stop attacking people brave enough to call you out. $113 million, not building anything, not helping anyone, just cleaning up messes you made. Trump started to speak. Crockett held up hand. I am not finished with math because $113 million just what you paid in settlements, verdicts. Let us talk about what American families paying because of you. She pulled out new sheet paper, handwritten figures, large clear numbers. Tariffs, $1,200 per household per year. That is tax foundation estimate. They are not liberal organization. They have been doing tax analysis since before your father was lending you money to avoid paying yours. There are approximately 130 million households in America. Multiply together. She wrote calculation on paper, 1,200 times 130 million equals $156 billion per year. That is how much tariffs costing American families. Not China, not foreign governments. American families every year. Taken from grocery budgets, clothing budgets, childcare budgets, retirement savings. 156 billion. She wrote number, large figures, 156 billion, wall funding, 6 billion, not Mexico, American taxpayers. Tax cuts corporations 2017, $1.9 trillion over 10 years, trillion with T. Guess who makes difference when corporations pay less? Not corporations. Working families through reduced services, increased deficits, eventually, inevitably, higher taxes on people who cannot afford lobbyists. She added numbers, calculator whirring again. In first term, now second, you transferred more wealth from working families to corporations, government coffers, than any president in modern history. And you've done it while telling people someone else was paying, someone else footing bill. China, Mexico, foreign countries finally getting what deserved. She sat down. Calculator looked directly at Trump. That is not economic policy. That is magic trick con, shell game played national scale. Only people who do not see are ones you convince look wrong, Shell. She walked closer. You know difference between you street hustler running 3-card Monte games sidewalk Manhattan? Street hustler goes jail when caught, you go White House. But con is exactly same. Make people believe going win, take money while distracted, move next mark. And if anyone complains, tell them they are problem, tell them did not understand game, tell them everyone else happy. So what wrong with them? Audience completely silent. Even camera operators seemed frozen, afraid move break spell. 113 million personal settlements, 156 billion per year tariffs, 46 billion wall, trillions corporate tax cuts. At some point, Mr. President, math becomes undeniable. You are not making deals, you are taking money, and you are very, very good making people thank you for it. Round 5 was over, and numbers were on table for everyone count. If this math makes you angry, good, share it. Let others do calculations. The final round did not start with evidence. It did not start with documents or receipts or calculator tapes or photographs. It started with silence. Jasmine Crockett stood at her podium, looking at Donald Trump for a long moment. Not with anger, though she had earned the right to anger. Not with contempt, though contempt would have been understandable. With something that looked almost like sadness. The kind of sadness you feel when you finally understand something you had been trying not to see. Mr. President, she said finally, her voice quiet enough that people in the back rows leaned forward to hear. I have one last question for you, and I want you to really think about it before you answer. Take your time. There is no clock. There is no buzzer. Just you and me and 50 million people waiting to hear what you have to say. Trump straightened in his seat, wary, his eyes narrowing. In 78 years of life, in 50 years of business, in 8 years of politics, can you name one time, just one time, when you paid the price for something you did wrong? She paused, letting the question land. Not when someone else paid. Not when you settled and moved on. Not when you declared bankruptcy and let creditors and employees absorb the loss. Not when you blamed someone else and escaped consequences. One time when you personally, Donald John Trump, faced real consequences. Consequences that hurt. Consequences that cost you something you could not buy back. Consequences the way regular Americans face them every single day when they make mistakes. She waited. Trump opened his mouth, then closed it. His hand moved toward his water glass, stopped, retreated. Take your time, Crockett repeated. I will wait. We will all wait. 10 seconds passed. The audience barely breathed. 20 seconds. Someone coughed in the back and immediately tried to stifle it. 30 seconds. A minute. The silence became a presence in the room, a weight pressing down on everyone. You cannot answer, Crockett said softly. Because there is no answer. In 78 years, you have never once paid the price for anything. Not really. Not. Not in a way that mattered, not in a way that changed you or taught you or made you better. She took a step closer to him. When your businesses failed, 6 bankruptcies, you declared bankruptcy and walked away. The contractors paid, the investors paid, the employees who lost their jobs paid, the cities that gave you tax breaks paid. You bought a new yacht when your casinos collapsed. You had already taken your management fees. Other people lost their retirement savings. You lost nothing but the chance to lose more of other people's money. Another step. When your university was exposed as fraud, you paid a settlement with money that meant nothing to you. $25 million. That sounds like a lot to the families in this room. To you, it was a rounding error, a nuisance. The cost of making a bad headline go away. The students lost years of their lives fighting for justice. You lost the equivalent of what you spend on golf in a year. Another step. She was close now, close enough to see the sweat on his forehead, the pulse in his neck. When you were found liable for sexual abuse, you paid millions and went back to your rallies the next day. The woman you hurt will carry that trauma forever. Every time someone says her name, she has to relive what you did. For you, it was a news cycle, something to rage about on social media for a week and then forget. She was directly in front of him now, and now as president, you have imposed the highest tariffs in 90 years. Who pays? American families every time they go to the grocery store. You sign executive orders that tear children from their parents. Who pays? Those children with nightmares and therapy bills and trust issues for the rest of their lives. You promised a wall that Mexico would fund. Who pays? Taxpayers. While programs for veterans and seniors and disabled Americans get cut. She leaned in slightly. Every single time, the pattern is the same. You cause the damage, someone else cleans it up. You take the credit, someone else takes the blame. You move on to the next thing, someone else is left behind picking up the pieces. She straightened and took a step back. So let me tell you who you are, Mr. President. Since you will not tell us yourself, since 78 years of life have not given you the self-awareness to figure it out. She raised one finger. You are not a businessman. Businessmen create value. They build things that did not exist before. They employ people and pay them fairly and create products that improve lives. You extract value. You take from contractors, from students, from business partners, from families, and you leave wreckage behind. That is not business. That is parasitism. A second finger. You are not a deal maker. Deal makers find mutual benefit. They create agreements where both sides walk away better off than they started. You find ways to make others pay for your benefit. You promise one thing and deliver another. You shake hands and then refuse to honor the agreement. That is not dealing, that is taking. A third finger. You are not a leader. Leaders accept responsibility when things go wrong. Leaders say, I made a mistake, I will fix it, I will do better. You have never said those words in your life. When things go wrong, it is always someone else's fault. The judges, the media, the Democrats, the deep state, the rhinos, the woke mob. Everyone except the man in the mirror. That is not leadership. That is cowardice dressed in a red hat. She lowered her hand. You are quite simply a man who has spent 78 years making other people pay for his mistakes. And tonight, 50 million Americans finally see it. Not because I told them something new, but because I reminded them of what they already knew and had been afraid to say out loud. She turned to the audience. Let me ask you all a question now. How many of you have ever paid for a mistake? Not someone else's mistake, your own. A bill you could not quite cover, so you ate rice and beans for a month. A job you lost because you messed up and it took you 6 months to find another one. A choice that cost you, really cost you, and you had to live with the consequences. Almost every hand went up, slowly at first, then more until the room was a forest of raised arms. That is what separates you from him. You pay your debts, you own your errors, you lie awake at night worrying about things he has never thought about for a single second. Whether you can afford your kids' braces, whether your car will pass inspection, whether your job will still exist next year, you know what accountability feels like because you live it every day. She turned back to Trump. And he stands up there and tells you that he is fighting for you, that he understands you, that he is one of you, that only he can fix your problems. She shook her head slowly. He is not one of you. He has never been one of you. Not for 1 minute of his 78 years. He does not know what it feels like to choose between groceries and medicine. He does not know what it is like to work a job where your boss can fire you for anything. He does not know what it is like to raise children while worrying about whether you can afford their school supplies. He knows nothing about your life, and he does not care to learn, because to him you are not people. You are marks, you are revenue. You are the ones who pay while he walks away with his pockets full. She turned back to Trump one final time. Tonight, for the first time in a long time, you cannot walk away. You cannot declare bankruptcy on this conversation. You cannot sue your way to silence. You cannot tweet your way to distraction. You have to sit here and face what you are. And I think that is why you have not said a word in 10 minutes. Because for the first time in your life, there is nowhere to hide. Trump sat motionless. His face was pale, the television makeup unable to hide the grayness underneath. His hands were still on the armrests, gripping so hard the tendons stood out like cables. His mouth was a thin line pressed tight, holding back words that would not come. I am going to give you one more chance, Mr. President. One more chance to answer my question. In 78 years, when did you pay the price for your own actions? When did you personally suffer for something you did wrong? Give me one example. Just one. 5 seconds? 10? 30? A full minute? Nothing. Not a word, not a sound. That is what I thought, Crockett said. She gathered her papers, her receipts, her evidence, her calculator, and tucked them back into her bag, slowly, methodically, giving the silence room to breathe. America, you have seen tonight who this man really is. Not through my words, through his silence. Through his inability to name a single moment of accountability in 8 decades of life. You have seen the pattern laid out in receipts and settlements and court documents. Promise that others will pay. Take the benefits for yourself. Leave the wreckage for everyone else. China will pay. Mexico will pay. You will be rich. The same con over and over with different packaging and different marks. She walked to the edge of the stage and looked directly into the camera, directly into the eyes of 50 million Americans. The question now is not whether Donald Trump will change. He is 78 years old. He will not change. He cannot change. This is who he is, who he has always been, who he will always be. The question is whether we will change, whether we will keep falling for the same con over and over, or whether we will finally say enough, no more. The bill stops here. We are done paying for your mistakes. She picked up her bag and slung it over her shoulder. My name is Jasmine Crockett. I am a congresswoman from Texas. I am running for United States Senate, and I am not asking you to trust me. I am asking you to trust the receipts, the evidence, the math, the pattern you have seen with your own eyes tonight. Because unlike the man sitting behind me, numbers do not lie, receipts do not lie, court documents do not lie. The truth is stubborn that way. She turned and walked off the stage, her footsteps echoing in the absolute silence behind her. Donald Trump sat alone under the lights, surrounded by empty space and 50 million watching eyes, with nothing to say. For the first time anyone could remember, the man who always had words, always had attacks, always had someone to blame, had nothing. Just silence and the receipts piled on the table. The applause that finally broke the stillness was not the roaring approval of a political rally. It was something deeper, something more personal, something almost sacred. The sound of people who finally felt seen, who finally felt that someone understood what they had been going through, who finally had someone to blame other than themselves for the prices they were paying. Mrs. Rodriguez was crying quietly in the third row. The veteran had sat back down, but he was nodding over and over as if saying yes to something he had waited a long time to hear. Across the auditorium, people were turning to each other, strangers sharing a moment, a recognition, a release. 50 million people watched, and in living rooms across America, something shifted. Something that could not be put back. What happened next unfolded in stages like a slow-motion avalanche gaining mass and momentum as it descended. The clip titled, "Who Always Pays?" reached 52 million views within 24 hours. It was not the largest political video in American history, but it was close, and unlike most viral moments, the gaffes, the gotchas, the awkward stumbles, this was not a mistake someone made. It was 6 minutes of a woman asking a simple question and a man unable to answer. The hashtag Trump never pays trended globally for 3 consecutive days, not promoted by bots or political operatives or coordinated campaigns, but shared organically by ordinary people who saw their own stories in Crockett's words. The contractor who never got paid, the student who lost their savings, the family struggling to afford groceries, the veteran whose son lost everything. Memes proliferated across every platform. Trump's face photoshopped onto images of people dodging restaurant bills, hiding from landlords, running from collection agencies. The most shared showed him as a cartoon figure sprinting away from a giant receipt labeled 78 years of unpaid tabs. Another showed him at a restaurant saying, "Mexico will pay," while the waiter looked confused. Saturday Night Live opened their next episode with a cold open featuring Trump in a therapy session, desperately trying to name one time he paid for something. The therapist, played by a perfectly cast comedian, kept asking, "But how did that make you feel?" And Trump kept answering, "Somebody else feels the feelings. I just win. I always win, except when I lose, which is never except when it is. But that's someone else's fault." The business community began to distance themselves. Not publicly, at first few wanted to be the first to break ranks, but in the quiet ways that mattered. Phone calls not returned, meetings postponed indefinitely, invitations to golf outings withdrawn. The casual association with Trump that had been a status symbol in certain circles became a liability. 3 Republican senators, all from swing states facing tough re-election campaigns, held a joint press conference demanding a comprehensive review of tariff policy. They did not mention the town hall directly, but they did not need to. "Our constituents are struggling with rising costs," Senator Marcus from Pennsylvania said, standing between his colleagues from Wisconsin and Nevada. "We need to take another look at trade policy and ensure it is working for American families, not against them." Walmart and Target, companies that had quietly absorbed tariff costs for months to keep prices competitive, issued public statements within hours of each other. "Recent trade policies have significantly impacted our pricing," Walmart CEO said in a carefully worded release. "We are committed to affordability, but we cannot continue to absorb these costs indefinitely. We urge policymakers to consider the impact on working families." Target's statement was nearly identical, as if both companies had finally received permission to say what they had been thinking for months. Internal polling leaked to the press showed Trump's approval rating dropping 15 points in 2 weeks, the sharpest decline since the early days of the pandemic. The crosstabs were worse. Among women over 50, he was down 23 points. Among suburban voters who had narrowly supported him in 2024, he was now underwater by 12. Among independents, the collapse was even more dramatic. The Supreme Court ruling came on a Thursday morning in late winter, announced without fanfare in a brief order that would reshape American trade policy. In a narrow 5-4 decision, the court found that Trump's emergency tariffs exceeded presidential authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The statute, the majority wrote, never mentioned tariffs and was never intended to allow a president to unilaterally impose taxes on virtually all imports. "The power to tax is the power of Congress," Justice Williams wrote for the majority. "A president may not, under the guise of emergency, exercise a legislative function that the Constitution reserves to the people's representatives." The administration announced a 30% rollback of tariffs within hours, framed as a strategic recalibration rather than a defeat. It satisfied no one. Critics said it was too little too late. Supporters said it was a betrayal of campaign promises. The rollback itself became evidence of what Crockett had argued. The tariffs were never necessary, never effective, and always designed more for political theater than economic policy. The phrase Trump tax entered the national vocabulary not as a partisan attack but as a descriptor. News anchors used it casually. Editorial boards debated its accuracy. A children's television host accidentally said it during a segment about economics and had to be edited out in post-production. The Trump tax on groceries became shorthand for the gap between what things should cost and what they actually cost. In Texas, something unprecedented happened. A poll showed a generic Democrat leading a generic Republican in the Senate race for the first time since 1994. Crockett's fundraising numbers shattered records: $12 million in 30 days, mostly from small-dollar donations averaging $47, the same number of times Trump had lied about who pays tariffs. It was unclear whether donors had chosen that number deliberately, but it did not matter. The symbolism was perfect. By the time 6 months had passed, the transformation was complete. The word "trumped" had acquired a new meaning in popular usage: to be deceived by someone who promised others would pay. "I got trumped by my contractor," people said around water coolers. The warranty was a total Trump job, people wrote in product reviews. Language has a way of crystallizing truth into slang, and the truth about Trump had found its vernacular expression. Dictionaries began adding the new definition. A documentary titled "The Bill Always Comes" premiered on multiple streaming platforms simultaneously, featuring interviews with Trump University victims, unpaid contractors, economists explaining exactly how tariffs worked and who paid them, and families struggling to afford groceries. It was watched by 40 million households in its first month and won early buzz for award season. Congressional hearings examined tariff policy with new intensity. Expert after expert testified that American consumers and businesses bore the cost, regardless of what the administration claimed. Charts and graphs filled television screens, but none of them were as powerful as Crockett's original presentation: a shopping cart, a receipt, and a question. Political analysts began referring to the Phoenix effect, named after the site of the town hall, to describe the moment when a political figure's vulnerabilities, long known but rarely confronted, become impossible to ignore. Trump's weaknesses were always there, one analyst wrote in a piece that went viral itself. The pattern was visible to anyone who looked. Crockett just made people see it. She gave them permission to see it, and once you see something like that, you cannot unsee it. The midterm elections approached with a new dynamic reshaping races across the country. Candidates in both parties calibrated their positions on trade, on tariffs, on economic populism. The conversation had shifted. Where once tough on China was an unquestionable good, now candidates had to explain what it meant for prices, for families, for the people who actually paid the bills. Republican candidates in swing districts quietly removed tariff boasts from their campaign materials. Trump himself changed, not in substance, that ship had sailed decades ago, but in energy. His rallies, once 3-hour marathons of grievance and entertainment and off-script improvisation, became shorter, more defensive, more scripted. He still attacked, he still deflected, he still blamed, but something was missing. The bravado had an edge of desperation. The confidence seemed performed rather than felt. His crowds noticed. They still cheered, but with less enthusiasm, less certainty. He never answered Crockett's question. In 6 months of interviews, speeches, social media posts, and campaign events, he never named a single instance of paying the price for his own mistakes. Interviewers asked, he deflected. The silence became its own answer, repeated every time someone brought it up, becoming more damning with each repetition. And somewhere in Phoenix, in a modest house in a working-class neighborhood where the grass was brown from water restrictions and the mailbox was slightly dented, Mrs. Rodriguez taped the grocery receipt to her refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a saguaro cactus. The receipt from the day before the town hall showing prices that were 30% higher than they had been 2 years earlier, with items circled in red pen. A reminder, a testament, a record of what she had paid because someone promised that others would. Her grandchildren asked about it sometimes. "Why is that receipt on the fridge, Abuela?" And she would tell them, in her measured way, about the night someone finally said out loud what everyone had been feeling. The night the man who never paid for anything had to sit in silence while a woman from Texas read him his bill. They did not fully understand, not yet, but someday they would. Someday they would be old enough to know what it meant when powerful people made promises they never intended to keep. And they would remember the receipt on the refrigerator, yellowed with age but never thrown away. Some things are worth keeping. The Texas Senate race is still months away. That story has not been written yet. But something had already been won in that town hall in Phoenix, something that could not be measured in votes or polls or fundraising numbers. For the first time in decades, someone had held a president accountable in real time with evidence that ordinary people could understand. Not in a courtroom where lawyers speak in jargon and procedure obscures meaning, not in a congressional hearing where 5-minute time limits and parliamentary rules prevent any real exchange, but in a simple conversation with simple props, asking simple questions that anyone could understand. Who pays? It turned out the answer had been there all along, hidden in plain sight on every receipt, every tax form, every electric bill, every grocery run. The American people pay, they always have, they always will, until they decide not to. And they finally had someone willing to say it out loud. The town hall lasted 2 hours. The clips are still circulating. Months later, the phrase 47 times became shorthand for political lying. The shopping cart became iconic, reproduced on protest signs and political cartoons and Halloween costumes. Someone started selling replicas of the receipt with "Who pays" printed at the bottom, donating proceeds to food banks. But the most lasting image was not the card or the receipt or the calculator tape or the photograph of the rusting wall. It was the silence at the end, the 10 minutes of silence, the longest 10 minutes of Donald Trump's public life. The moment when a man who had never been held accountable, who had never faced a question he could not deflect, who had never sat with the weight of his own choices, was finally forced to face the question he could not answer. When did you ever pay the price? 78 years, 50 years of business, 8 years of politics, 3,500 lawsuits, 6,000 defrauded students, 25 million in settlements, 88 million in verdicts, 156 billion in tariffs, $46 billion for a wall, and not one single example. That silence said more than any speech could, more than any attack ad or investigation or editorial or documentary. It said what everyone had always suspected but rarely heard confirmed: this man has spent his entire life making others pay for his choices. Now, finally, the bill was coming due. And for the first time in 78 years, Donald Trump had no one to pass it to. If this story resonated with you, if you have felt the pinch of rising prices and wondered who was responsible, if you have been cheated and told it was your fault, if you have paid for someone else's mistakes while they walked away, share it with someone who needs to hear it. The receipts are real. The numbers are documented. The pattern is clear. The only question left is whether we are finally ready to stop paying the bill. My name is Jasmine Crockett, and I approve this message. Well, she didn't actually say that last part, but she might as well have. The conversation had begun, and it wasn't going to end anytime soon. The receipts, after all, were still on the table.